I'm Richard Osterlin, and welcome to my 13 Steps. So we thought it would be a really interesting project to put together Richard Osterlin's 13 Steps on the fundamentals of mentalism, what I've created over the years as to what I consider to be the fundamentals of how I work and in my performing in my professional career. Matthew, is it? First step will be the presentation of mentalism, which is what we're into right now, which I will go into how I approach the art and what goes on in my head and the character I want to portray on stage and what have you. Susie?
Oh my God, stop it.
Let me just remind you, all these routines have been used and tested over 40-some years of real work. This material has been performed everywhere. It's material that will work in the real world. No pipe dreams here. So I can assure you that if you put the time and energy into learning this material, you will be successful. Hi, I'm Richard Osterlin, and welcome to my 13 Steps. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I hope you enjoy this project. The reason this came about is because over the years, in my 40 to 50 years of performing, I've created a lot of different effects. And interestingly, they fall in line with a lot of the steps that was in Corinda's 13 Steps to Mentalism. And as a matter of fact, a few years ago when I recorded my DVD rendition of the book with Tony Corinda for L&L Studios, I saw there was a lot of overlap in things that I had created and the original 13 Steps. And it wasn't by design. I didn't create things to go in line with the 13 Steps, but rather out of necessity. So we thought it would be a really interesting project to put together Richard Osterlin's 13 Steps on the fundamentals of mentalism, what I've created over the years as to what I consider to be the fundamentals of how I work in my performing in my professional career. The first step will be the presentation of mentalism, which is what we're into right now, which I will go into how I approach the art and what goes on in my head and the character I want to portray on stage and what have you. The next step will be billets, and I'll be demonstrating my perfected center tear, my natural billet switch with a lighter, and my take on acidus novus. We're going to go into nail writer after that, and I'm going to cover that in a different way. I'm going to spend a lot of time showing you how I prepare my nail writers, how I get them to fit, and how I use them, as well as some routines. Because to me, that's always been the biggest problem. People have trouble fitting the writers on their thumb and being able to use them. So we're going to go into that. Playing cards will be after that, and that will feature my breakthrough card system. And I'm going to teach that in detail and show you the shortcuts and what have you to really learn it thoroughly. Next, we'll move into book test, where I'm going to show you my handling of some standard methods as well as some of my own original ideas, like my erratum effect and some effects that can be done spontaneously with ungimmick books, like my poor man's book test and a way to force a page in a book, and the Hoy book test. We'll cover all that. Next, we'll move into blindfolds, and of course, there I'll be talking about my stainless steel blindfold. I'm going to show how it should fit and how you should use it, and the ways you can tape up your eyes ahead of time when using it, and some routines with it, as well as our versatile blindfold, which you can make yourself or you can purchase, either one, but it's a beautiful blindfold that has a lot of uses too. Then we're going to move into metal bending. That's one of my favorite topics. I'm going to show you my routines for bending spoons that I've been using for years, and all the different little methods I have, little touches that I've developed over the years. We're going to move to stage routines. I'm going to feature two of my prominent stage routines that I demonstrated in this show, so you'll see it in front of a live audience. One's going to be my watch routine, And secondly will be the magazine test. These have been two of my major routines over the years. And just to let you in on something, I've decided after all these many years to retire the current show I'm doing. I've been doing this show and refining it all these years, and I finally decided I have a different area I'm moving into, and I've developed some new routines. So all these routines, this will be the last time I'll ever be performing them. But of course, for you, you've got all these brand new routines that hopefully you've never done before, or even if you have, you'll see my latest refinements in them, like the magazine test and a watch routine. Then we're going to talk about close-up routines. I'm going to show you some of the routines that I've developed over the years that I use in different close-up situations, whether it be for a trade show or just impromptu at sitting around a table. This will also include some no-prop routines, like what day for any date of the current year, or maybe some memory work that you can do without having any props whatsoever. Then I'm going to go into cold reading. I'm going to teach you how I learned to cold read in some different methods that I now use and how I incorporate them into my show. After that, I'm going to go into Q&A work. Now, Q&A work, a lot of times message reading is called Q&A. It's actually two different things. I'm going to teach my thought scan act, which is a message reading act. And then I'm going to also teach a second act that is, in fact, a real Q&A act. Then we're going to move into hypnotism and suggestion. I'm going to show you how you can use even some mild suggestion techniques in your show that have a devastating effect and make you look like you're really a hypnotic wizard. And they're very easy to learn and put into practice right away. And finally, we're going to end a whole 13 step with muscle reading, something I've never really featured on any of my DVDs, but those of you who have seen my lectures and my workshops know that I really feature a lot in those. So that's all going to be covered. So we're going to cover all the fundamentals that I've created for myself in my own performing situation over the years. And let me just remind you, all these routines have been used and tested over 40-some years of real work. I worked mostly corporate work, but house parties, you name it, comedy clubs. This material has been performed everywhere. It's material that will work in the real world. No pipe dreams here. So I can assure you that if you put the time and energy into learning this material, you will be successful. Thank you very much. I have to explain to you what my own approach is to mentalism, because this is Richard Osterland's 13 Steps. I have always had a very direct approach. I have always approached the art similar to a way a magician might perform, insofar as I don't come out and try to explain what I'm doing. I never talk about telepathy or precognition or clairvoyance. I just do stuff. I just come out and right from the beginning I say, okay, here's a piece of paper, you write a name down and what have you. I have a silent script in my head. I know that the different areas of mentalism are telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, maybe telekinesis, and some related subjects like memory work and quick math and that type of thing. I blend them all together in my head. Because I don't describe them, I don't explain them, I just do them, I think it becomes very interesting. It also avoids a lot of problems. For instance, if you, let's say, have an effect where you're going to guess a word somebody's thinking of, and you say, okay, I'm going to demonstrate my ability to use telepathy to read your mind and tell you a word you're thinking of. And then you have them write something down and you get the word, they look it up in the book, and you get the word. That's fine. Well, it shouldn't come as any great surprise if that person turns around and looks at you and says, okay, well, then I'm going to think of something else and read my mind. Because you've implied or said that you can do that. You said, I have telepathy. And so it's not even a question that the person may be trying to catch you out or challenge you. They just seen you do something and, oh, okay, well, do it this way then, because if you can do it. You see, that's the kind of problems you can run into. Whereas if you just say, look, here's a book, open it up anywhere, think of a word on the page, just concentrate, and you name the word. Wow, how did he do that? What was it? Did he read my mind? Did I give it away somehow? Was it a trick? I don't know where to go with that. And that's the way I present my mentalism. It's nothing new. I didn't make this up. If you look in Practical Mental Effects and you read Anneman's comments about Bert Reese, who was one of the greatest billet workers of all times, that was exactly his approach. In a time when spiritualism was very popular in the world, and a lot of times people who did what he did attributed what they did to some kind of spiritualism, he would just do it. And he let the person decide themselves what power supposedly he had that enabled him to get the information that was written down on billets. So this is nothing new with me, and it just comes across a lot better, in my opinion. See, at least it's always the way I present the mentalism. It just comes across a lot better by just doing it and not worrying about explaining anything. It also allows me, as I said, to blend things together. For instance, how often have you heard someone say, well, if you're a real mind reader, why would you have somebody write something down? Well, that assumes that you're demonstrating the ability of telepathy. But if I'm in my head, I'm thinking I have telepathy, I have clairvoyance, and all these other things. Well, then, if I have somebody write something down and I pick it up and say, I need to touch the folded paper for a second, and then maybe I rip it up and give them the pieces back and then guess the name, again, it's like, wonder what that procedure was all about. Did he need to touch the paper? Did he feel something? Did he get vibrations? Was he reading my mind? How did that whole thing work? What was going on? That's interesting for a spectator. It's got sort of a storyline behind it. You know, when you think about it, in movies and in books, popular fiction, whenever the subject of magic or mentalism comes up, where the author can do whatever he wants. He can create whatever reality he wants, because whatever he says, that's what's going to be made, the movie is going to be made into. Whenever you're in that scenario, you'll always find, first of all, the author will put limitations somewhat on the powers of the superstar. As a matter of fact, if you go to Wikipedia and you look up magic and fiction, you'll see they specifically mention that authors always put limitations, some limitations, on the powers of the magician. Because if not, he would be like a god and could do everything. There wouldn't be no storyline. That's why there's always some kind of limitations. You know, you watch Harry Potter, you watch Lord of the Rings, even people like Gandalf or Harry Potter, you know, they can only do so much. They can't do just anything. Well, likewise with mentalism, you know, it's as though, yeah, you can touch upon certain aspects, but you don't have unlimited control of that. That would be crazy. I never, in my own head, I never ever try to demonstrate precognition, for instance, the ability to predict the future. And that comes up often. I'll talk about that right now since I mentioned it. People often come up to me and say, can you predict my future? And I say, no. You know, I say, you know, futures, I don't believe the future's set. We all have free will. We can, you know, do what we want. You know, to suggest the future is already preset, you would be like a robot. You wouldn't have any kind of free will. But then I also say to them, I say, but imagine if you could predict the future for real. Would you want to? And most people, I say that to kind of look at me and go, oh man, no, I don't think so. You know, that's a scary thought. So I never go there. Whenever I do any kind of effect that you might think of as a prediction effect or an effect of precognition, I always apply it in such a way that it looks like I am simply controlling the person to do what I want them to do. For instance, in my watch routine, which you'll see later, someone thinks of a time, and I write down my impressions on a blackboard. Somebody else spins the watch, face down. But I say, look at me in the eye. I don't explain why they're doing that. I just say, look at me in the eye, and then stop whenever you want and move your hand away. So I imply that somehow I am thinking at them the proper time to stop turning the watch. Now, of course, it still leaves open the question, well, how does he know where the watch is? Because it's face down. It's not his watch. It's Burroughs' watch. Those are all questions. It's all mystery. See, a big part of mentalism is always mystery. And that's what I want him to think. I want him to wonder about that. And at the end, when the times match, it's like, wow, that's almost too much to take in. It's just incredible. This guy seems to be able to be do anything. He's special. He looks ordinary and normal, but the stuff he does, even if I give him the fact that maybe he can pick up thoughts and read minds, how can he do that? That just seems to go even beyond there. And that's so interesting. I was never one to believe in you should only demonstrate one or two powers. You don't see that happening in fiction. You don't even see it happen in reality. For instance, all my big stars that I kind of based what I do on, like Dunninger and Kreskin and Al Korean, they always demonstrated a lot of different abilities. Uri Geller, who for a long time the world took as being an absolutely real psychic, not only bent metal, but he was able to pick up people's thoughts. There was even examples of teleportation where somebody's key lit from the hotel room suddenly flew out into the reality and dropped on the table in front of them, and crazy things like that. Plus, the ability to control things and all kinds of other different aspects. I always use the example of Bruce Willis in the movie Unbreakable, where he suddenly discovers in the movie that he's some kind of superhero. He's got superpowers. And then, as he goes on and develops these powers and discovers what he can do, he sort of becomes a crime fighter. And then it turns out that if he touches somebody in a crowd, like if he's walking through a train station, subway station, brushes up against somebody, all of a sudden, whoosh, he gets all the thoughts of this person's life. And maybe if they're a criminal, or who they've killed, or what they've done, you see, it all comes to him by the fact that he touches against them, see? The procedure is that he needs to touch them. Until he touches them, he doesn't just get the thoughts, he has to touch them. That's something, a limitation, if you will, that the scriptwriters created, that the author created for that storyline. That's how I approach mentalism. I can't just look at a person and know what's going on in their mind. I can't just look at another person and go sleep and they're gone and I can tell them what to do. But I can do that kind of thing given the right circumstances, and I have to follow certain procedures, which again, I never explain, I just do them. And as long as I am not claiming anything, then I never have to worry about a disclaimer. I do come out in the beginning of my show and I say I'm a mentalist. I use abilities we all have, but that I have developed over the years. And then I move into my show. It's not to disclaim anything. It's not to say to them, I don't have any supernatural powers, because I never say I do. So why should I say I don't? But rather to tell them I'm just like you, which I think is a good way to approach the art. And I'll tell you why. Mentalism is much different than magic in a lot of different ways. And over the years, there have been times when I've worked with magicians, and they would get so mad at me because after the show, people would come up to me and they would say, hey, you were wonderful. I have no idea. Then they look at the other guy and say, yeah, it's just tricks. But you, how could you read people's minds? And they would get so mad. They took it like as though somehow I was better than them. That's not the case at all. I have to make this point, because this is what I base my whole approach to mentalism on. And if you don't understand this, you can't understand why I'm teaching all this, why I work the way I do, and why I do stuff in my act and created it this way. Magic, very rarely does magic look like magic. What we think of as magic, that's like supernatural power. That's what magic is. Most things that you see magicians do are in different categories. That might be a puzzle. It might be a demonstration of sleight of hand. It might be illusion, big boxes that are built to hide things. But nobody really thinks of it as some kind of supernatural power. And very rarely would a magician do something that if you did have supernatural power, you would do. If you really had the ability to have supernatural power, would you do some of the things that magicians do? Like cut a rope in half and put it back together? Nothing wrong with that. I love magic. I love illusion. I love sleight of hand. I love all that stuff. I'm just saying it's really not magic. Most card magicians would be better off calling themselves card experts or gambling experts. even if they only did one gambling routine, and after that do with the same stuff you're doing now. Being called a gambling expert would seem to give you more prestige than a card magician, because that doesn't look like magic. It looks like sleight of hand. It looks like manipulation. And you're better off, like when in the card section that I'm going to be doing in these 13 steps, you'll see I always relate it to gambling. I give it some reason for being. And that is the difference between magic and mentalism. Mentalism really does tend to look like you would imagine a person who has ESP would look like and do. It accomplishes the very things that you would do if you really had powers of ESP. Let me explain. Now, I use this example all the time. Let's say you had Donald Trump sitting in front of you, and you had a choice of showing him one of two things, teaching him one or two things. The first one was you put $4 half here and close your hands on them, and one at a time, they go from 3 to 1, 2 to 2, 1 to 3, and then all 4. Just like that clean and that beautiful. The other effect is you could read somebody's mind. Taking those two options, which one do you think Donald Trump would be more interested in? This is pretty, and this is very skillful. However you do it, it looks really pretty. But does it have any meaning in real life? What could you do with that? On the other hand, the ability to read a person's mind, think of that. What could Donald Trump do with that ability? He could make billions of dollars. Most anybody could have their life change drastically, hopefully for the better, if they could read somebody's mind. And that's what happens when an audience sees a mentalist. They look at them and they say, if I could do that, if I had that kind of ability, think of how my life would change. Now, I'm not saying all this to try to say you ought to have this approach or that approach. I'm just saying this is how it is. This is what the power represents. The ability to read somebody's mind is an awesome power. In this day and age, when information is the most valuable thing we have, when everything is computers and cell phones and tablets and you name it, pads, iPads, it's always information, information, information. So what happens with mentalism? Mentalism does stuff that modern technology can't even begin to approach. Mentalism, there's no computer made with all these incredible advances in computer technology. There's not a computer made that can read somebody's mind like a good mentalist can with a pencil and piece of paper. That's the power of the art. That's how strong it is. All aspects of mentalism come across like that. That's why I have what I call the anti-expert theory. A lot of guys want to come out and they want to act like, I've been doing this for the last 40 years, and that's why I've been able to develop this ability and that ability. If you saw something that really excited you and then you found out that it would take you 40 years to be able to do it, would you really be that excited about it anymore? On the other hand, if you saw somebody do something that was really incredible and you found out you already have this ability and you just need to tap into it, does that excite you? When you think about certain subjects, like for instance memory work, the first time you learn how to memorize things through let's say a Harry Lorraine system, it's incredible. It's like you found this incredible new super ability and you realize you've always had it. You just didn't know how to turn it on. People, I think, look at a mentalist like that and think, wow, I wish I could turn it on. I wish there was something I could do to get some kind of abilities like that. Also, not explaining the individual abilities helps tremendously, because if it all gets blurred together, well then you can say to people, well, what I do is unique to me, and you probably can develop abilities that are going to be unique to you and in what you do for a living, and so it can be inspirational. In this day and age, I think people tend to feel overwhelmed by technology. You know, what's your memory compared to a computer? What's your mathematical capabilities compared to a computer? But then when you see this kind of thing, it makes you feel like human beings still reign supreme. They're still on a much higher level than any machine is. That makes people feel good in general. So when I perform, I always keep that in the back of my head. I'm trying to present that to my audience too, to make them feel, yeah, we can do things. We have abilities, and this is true. I really believe this, especially when you look at the arts and creation of music and sculpture and paintings and whatever. We have the ability to do things machines can never come close to achieving. And I'd like to get that feeling across to the audience too. You have to love your audience. If you don't love your audience, you're not going to succeed. If I can tell you right now, I don't want to be negative, but if I can tell you the one biggest gripe that I have when I see a lot of entertainers is they're egotists. They come out and you can tell they're thinking of nobody but themselves. You do that, people will hate you. Nobody hates anybody worse than somebody who acts like egotistical. You got to not do that. You have to think about your audience first. You have to really, truly want to please your audience. You have to walk out there. You can't go out there with the thought, I want to look classy, I want to look good, I want to really have people drooling over. Man, you have to just put that out of your mind. You have to walk out there with the idea in your mind that I have the ability to show these people something they've never seen before. If I do it right, they're going to remember this stuff the rest of their life. I'm going to give them something they can't get anywhere else but from me tonight here. And it's going to be something special they're going to take away with them. And if I can do that right, I've really achieved something tonight. You have that kind of attitude. Care about the person and people in the audience that you're working for. They'll love you because you're loving them in the first place. One of the biggest problems that I have had in the past when I see people calling magic the art of deception. Magic is not the art of deception. Because if you think of that, then you have to think of every other art form as deception. If you look at a painting and it moves you in some way, you have to realize, well, I'm being deceived because all that is some animal skin with some pigment slapped on it. Doesn't matter who slapped it on. If Van Gogh slapped it on, still, all it is animal skin with pigment. Or if you hear an orchestra playing Mozart and it just fills you with some emotion. And then somebody came along and said, well, you're being deceived. What is that? It's noise. It's noise created by catgut running over wires or wind blowing through round tubing or whatever. But we don't think of art like that. We think of art totally differently. It's not deceiving you. So what if the picture is not real? It's not deceiving you. The picture is real. It creates an emotion in you. If along the course of that, there's illusion involved, like, okay, this paint looks like this or this. We understand that, but what's important is the final outcome, the final emotional feelings that you have from that. The same thing applies to magic and mentalism. Magic is not the art of deception. Magic is the art of the creation of mystery. That's what magic is. It creates mystery. It creates something that has no explanation. And that's a wonderful feeling. And there's no other art form existent that seeks to do that. And it's a wonderful thing. If you keep that in mind, that's your goal, is to create the mystery. And along those lines, let me end all this by just saying the primary goal of doing magic or mentalism is to create the magic or mentalism. These days, a lot of people talk about it's all about entertainment. It's all about entertainment. Well, yes, it is about entertainment. You do want to go out there. It is a show. That's why I never worry about, oh, people are going to think you're real and you're going to sway their mind. No, it's a show. You're supposed to go out there and you're supposed to act a part. You're supposed to be a mind reader, so do it. If you're not comfortable with that, then do something else. But if you're going to, just like if you're uncomfortable with playing a villain in a movie, well, then don't take the part of playing a villain in a movie. But if that doesn't bother you because you know it's simply a movie and you're good for that character, then do it. If you want to play the part of a mentalist, then do it. Do it right. Don't try to change what the word mentalism is to mean, oh, a person who reads body language or a person who can see the person's NLP. A mentalist is supposed to be a person who delves into areas of ESP and that type of thing, psychic phenomena. That's what it is. It's a show. That's what T.A. Waters used to say. Don't worry about it. It's a show. Okay? The thing is, though, that if you're talking about entertainment, realize what you are first before you think of entertainment. For instance, I've been to magic shows where, okay, humor is a good thing in magic. I would say that a good magic show ought to be maybe 75% magic and 25% humor. If you have somebody who's a great comedy magician, it might even be half and half. And I love great comedy magicians. I have a number of friends of mine who are wonderful comedy magicians. Half the show is fun, and the other half is mystery. When you start getting into the realm of 75% comedy and 25% magic, all of a sudden, I don't consider the person to be a magician anymore at all. They're a comedian, mostly, that uses a little magic as background in their show, if you see what I'm saying. Same thing goes with mentalism. I think primarily there ought to be mentalism effects. As a mentalist, you ought to be able to come out and do mentalism. Yes, there should be some humor, but it shouldn't override the mentalism. People ought not to look at you and say, he's a good comedian, he can also read minds. You should be, number one, the mind reader. And if you're a funny guy on top of that, well, that's great too. And that adds to it. And speaking of that, I've always found that mentalism especially requires comedy that happens on a spur of the moment. Because mentalism is more interactive, more intimate than maybe any other art form. You are dealing with people and reading their minds. And you are getting on the most intimate level with them. So to have pre-planned comedy bits and lines that you throw at the audience just is out of character. It almost comes across like you're throwing a show at them that you threw at the audience last night, at the audience the night before that. Every show ought to be unique. The audience ought to be made to feel, especially in a mentalism show, that this is special. This show has never happened before and never happen again. Things that are happening tonight are really different and unique because that's the nature of mentalism. So that's how I present it. I appreciate you being really patient and letting me go through all these different aspects. I hope you enjoy all these different steps. We'll talk more about these subjects as we go through the steps. So enjoy, and thank you very much.